Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining Rails to Trails Conservancy for this live chat on safe trail use during COVID-19, specifically as the weather gets colder in many parts of the country. With the changing seasons and emerging winter conditions, there are so many things to keep in mind to stay safe when one is outdoors on trails and getting in their physical activity. As we know, over the past 8 months with the pandemic, there's been a huge demand for safe outdoor spaces. COVID-19 has really demonstrated just how vital trails and green space are to American communities, especially right now. And at the same time, experts and public leaders continue to very much encourage and promote being outdoors as a safe way to be active while decreasing the chances of spreading the virus. Infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci was just recently quoted in CNN as saying that right now it's about mask wearing, social distance, avoiding congregate settings, doing things to the extent that we can outdoors versus indoors. If we do that, says Dr. Fauci, we'll be able to hold things off until the vaccine comes. So with all that we're seeing in the world right now, RTC thought it would be helpful to gather a team of experts to talk about the questions that we've been hearing from our audiences regarding safe trail use, and also about the merits of getting outdoors and on the trails right now. We also want to discuss some techniques for adapting trail activities to colder conditions. So let me introduce our guests for today. We have Dr. Rose Gowen. Dr. Gowen is a physician and city commissioner in the city of Brownsville, Texas. And she's also an RTC board member. Welcome, Dr. Gowen. We also have Dr. Jim Sallis, also an RTC board member. Dr. Sallis is a behavioral health psychologist and a foremost researcher on the intersection of the built environment and health. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Sallis. And welcome Vasu Sojitra, who is an influencer for RTC's Trail Moments campaign, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Vasu is a professional athlete and a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist living in Montana, where the winters are very significant. So thank you, Vasu, for joining us. And again, welcome everyone. So let's just go right into the questions. Cases are up. Cases of COVID are up all around the country, and there is a lot of concern about virus spread as people gather indoors and or try and isolate. Dr. Sallis, I think a big question on a lot of people's minds is, what is the best way that people can take care of their well-being right now?
Well, there's several elements of it, of course, and especially because we are in the midst of a big surge in infections and hospitalizations. I think the first concern is to keep yourself safe and uninfected and do everything you can to not infect other people. And especially around Thanksgiving, it's a time that we usually get together with family. And like a lot of people, I would advise against that this year, at least in person. So I would suggest some type of virtual getting together with family across the country or even across town, so that you can enjoy each other's presence, create some new moments, but just in a different way. So, and of course, mask wearing is very important, and staying apart from people physically, but not socially. The second aspect is, what can we do to keep our well-being going? The same things we always need to be doing: eating a healthy diet, being active, ideally every day, being moderate in use of alcohol, not smoking, getting plenty of sleep. Because those kind of things, our eating habits and other health habits, lead to chronic diseases, and those put us at risk for much worse cases of COVID if you indeed get infected. And the same goes for your family members. This is a time to be encouraging family members to eat well, be active, and sleep adequately. And as I think about it, it turns out that being active outdoors and being on trails can help with all of those things. So, for example, you can, on a trail, you can be somewhat physically distanced with your partner, whether that's a life partner or a friend or a relative, and you can be out on the trail and have a wonderful social connection without being too close and by being safer by being outdoors. So being active outdoors is really a good thing that fulfills several of the needs or the things that we need to be paying attention to right now.
Thank you, Dr. Sallis. I think that's a really good segue into our next question. Trails in the outdoors. Earlier this summer, the lower Rio Grande Valley, where you live, Dr. Gowen, was a hotspot for the virus. We know your community and your fellow residents were unfortunately very hard hit. Can you tell us how people living in the valley have been using trails during this time, when there are so many serious challenges being addressed by the medical and health communities to help people who have been adversely affected, and how trails might be serving to enable outdoor respite and a means by which people can try and stay not just physically healthy, but also mentally healthy during this time?
Sure. So yes, indeed, we are on the Mexican Gulf Coast border, and we have very high rates of obesity and diabetes and all obesity related illnesses, hypertension, cardiac disease, and more. And all of those things are risk factors, as Jim mentioned, that make it more likely that if you do get COVID, your course of your illness will be severe. And so that was part of the big unfortunate hotspot that we had, was not just the numbers of people getting COVID in our midst, but the number of people that were passing away from COVID. So in our area, we initially, policymakers closed many of the parks. We did not want to encourage people to congregate, but we made an intentional decision to keep the trails open. Because when you're on a trail, you're typically moving, either you're walking or you're riding a bike or you're jogging. You're not just standing around congregating with people. And we saw trail use go up tremendously. And there were lots of times that I began riding my bike to work, for instance, because I didn't have to be at meetings across town during that time. And what I saw was a lot of parents with small children out on the trails. So as parents had to keep their kids home for safety, I'm a parent, and you can go kind of stir crazy if you're inside with your small kids all day long. But they chose to take their kids out and look for butterflies and ride bikes and look for fish in our small lakes along the trail. And we saw that quite often. We also saw use of bike shops go up during that same time. And all of that has continued. We see trail users out. There's at certain times of the day, there's even almost like a traffic jam on some of our trails. And so people have learned when to avoid the busy times, so to speak. And we've all learned and spoken a lot about carrying a mask with you. So if you're on a trail and there's no one around you, then you can take your mask off. It's one of the safest places to take that mask off. But if you happen to come upon people that want to say hello or need help along the trail, put that mask on so that you are keeping yourself and them safe. And the trails have become very beloved, even more beloved than usual in our area.
Thank you, Dr. Gowen. That's great advice. That's great to hear. I think we can all agree in the trail world that they have been super important to so many people during this time. Since the pandemic started, trail use has been up about 60% on average. We are actually starting to see the usage numbers tick up too. Last week, they were 80% higher than in the previous year. So that really tells us something. But a lot of people think of trails as summer warm weather activity. And as we've just heard, being outside is going to be really important this winter as we continue to deal with the impact of the pandemic. Vasu, I think it's fair to say you live in the coldest climate of all of us. how do you adapt and change your outdoor activity when the weather gets cold? And what tips do you have that you found to be pretty tried and true when you're out there?
So yeah, Montana definitely has a lot of different varying climates, especially cold. We say, 9 months out of the year, we have winter here. So making sure that I wear the proper clothing, that's the biggest one. I try to avoid cotton because when cotton gets wet, it's a lot harder to dry. And usually in cold weather, it feels a lot colder. So try to avoid cotton. I know there's more inexpensive ways of getting more synthetic clothing that might, you might get it at Walmart or wherever. So try to do that. I also usually switch out my socks fairly frequently. My toes and fingers have gotten so many cold injuries over the years because of just the temperature changes that happen here. So I try to switch out my socks pretty frequently, just because feet do tend to sweat, and when that sweat starts getting cold, our feet get much colder. So trying to feel as comfortable as possible when we're hiking or walking around in the cold. Given that most of us might be working 9-to-5 jobs, if you are able to, purchase a headlamp, again, there are inexpensive options to be able to still hike or walk your dog or do anything outside once the sun goes down. That's always a good option. I've been trying to do that fairly frequently. The trails here. And another thing to really watch out for, especially in Montana and a lot of colder climates, is the trails in all these places get really icy and slick. So if you do have the opportunity to purchase some micro spikes that might go on your shoes, that's always a good option. If you're not able to, trying to use some sort of trekking poles or ski poles, or even just getting a stick from the woods to try to help you stay balanced on some of the icier stuff is super important. I personally use forearm crutches, what I call ninja sticks, but so I'm not able to use quote unquote trekking poles, but they're definitely still helpful when keeping me balanced on the trail whenever it's slick. So those are some of the good options that I've been using. Again, making sure we definitely layer up and wear gloves and wear thicker socks and anything like that to help stay warm, help stay comfortable while we're still trying to enjoy the outdoors.
Thank you. That's all really great advice, Vasu. And let me actually just add to that. That was really thorough. So RTC just published a blog very much affirming what Vasu just said by writer Amelia Benton on adapting trail activities for cold weather. This particular blog was really about adapting things that you would do in warmer weather, hiking, running, bicycling, extra warm weather exercises, and adapting them to the colder weathers. Special thanks also to Cinch Cycling Coaching. They permitted us to post this great graphic as well on what types of clothing one might consider in various temperatures. I think one key piece of advice when the temperatures begin to drop is reflected here, and that is to dress in layers. And reaffirming what Vasu just said, special thanks to Amelia Kegel, owner and director of marketing and events for the Bike Shop Wheel and Sprocket in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Her advice is don't change your plans, change your clothes. It's important to stress that this doesn't have to cost a lot of money or any, as many of us can adapt our routines to cold weather bicycling or running, specifically with things we might already have around the house. And she suggests wool blends or affordable synthetics as being ideal for base layers and then building from there. And as Vasu said, fabrics like cotton aren't your best bet for staying dry. Additionally, you probably want to start slightly cold when you get moving so you don't overheat and begin to sweat and have to remove layers. And finally, I want to thank Tom Sexton, director of RTC's Northeast office, for this great tip. Remember the saying that you lose more heat from your head and extremities is a myth. So back into the questions of Dr. Gowen. Even though you don't get snow in Brownsville, though I hear my colleagues got stuck in the 100-year snow when they visited you a few years ago, the days certainly do get cooler and shorter. what advice do you have for people as they consider getting outside and on the trail right now?
So even though we are very warm most of the year, in this time of year going into the winter months, usually in the mornings we are cooler. And because our people are so used to the warmth, what feels distinctly cooler sometimes frightens people away from going out and being active because they think, oh my gosh, it's cold today. And you see moms and families put on bigger jackets on their kids and such because even though it's not terribly cold, it's cooler than usual. So our advice is always to think about that because as the day wears on, it's gonna warm up, and then you're stuck with a heavy jacket that you don't need and need to carry around. I think that I would echo the layers concept. Take a light something jacket with you that you can take off and put in a backpack. The light reflective gear, I think, is very important as well, especially if you're going out in the early morning or as the evening comes on. Some of our trails are lit, but not all of them. If you feel safer taking a friend or a family member with you, a partner, a buddy, do it. Your buddy will probably thank you for getting them some fresh air during the day. And don't change your plans as the Miss Cagle mentioned. Make sure you have the right gear and the right friend or partner with you so that you can both remain active and safe and well seen. Try not to wear dark clothing, especially in our area where biking and hiking is a newish activity. So car traffic is not all very oriented to what we're doing out there. So don't wear dark clothing, wear light, bright colors, reflective gear, and make sure you take water with you because hot or cold, you need to be well hydrated, and maybe a little snack in your pocket along with that mask that you're carrying along, just in case you come upon people or feel that you need a snack.
Thank you. And I think actually that moves us right into one question that we just received from our social media audience. And I don't know, Dr. Gowen or Dr. Sallis or Vasu, if anyone can answer this. The question is very, very related. What are the best masks or suggested masks one should wear while riding a bicycle?
Well, personally, I think we all have our personal choices. Personally, I like the tube gaiter kind that you can leave around your neck. And if it's cool outside, it helps you stay warm in your neck and then pull it up if you need it. Bandanas are not felt to be the best in terms of safety wise. Regular masks are kind of cumbersome and you have to put them on. Either you wear them all the time or you have to stop and put it on. So I tend to favor the gaiter model.
Vasu or Dr. Sallis, anyone have anything to add?
I'm on that same boat with the gaiter model as well, especially in the winter. It's kind of like a all around useful. You can use it as a hat too if your ears get cold. So it's a very versatile piece of fabric.
Right.
Yeah, I'm the same. I use the gaiters when I'm biking typically, and because they're easy to pull up and down. And I based on what I've seen, a lot of the gaiters are thin, so I double it over my nose and mouth, so it works better. And I guess what about a little plug? RTC has logo gaiters, so you can show the colors from Rails to Trails.
Definitely. Thank you guys. So you know what, I will move right into our Recreate Responsibly guidelines. The National Recreate Responsibly Campaign for Safe Outdoor Activity just put out new guidelines for cold weather. This includes, let me run through these real quick. This includes, first and foremost, know before you go. Check the status of trail openings and closures. Some trails aren't open during the winter, and some trails change permitted uses depending on the weather. That includes things like snowmobiling. So, you know, just be aware of that when you're out. Also, when considering the weather, think about any potentially unsafe conditions and make sure you are dressed for the elements. Second, practice social distancing, of course. Plan ahead. Number 3, plan ahead. When on a trip, try and plan your activities, such as eating in breaks where you can be outside as much as possible. And so that is why I think knowing where you're going and knowing what will be open and what's not open is probably critically important, as is planning for proper dress. Play it safe, know your limits. Very much take seriously that winter weather is different than other weather, and our bodies can react very differently depending on how cold it is and what activities we're doing. So just kind of be very aware of that. Explore locally to avoid driving and parking in winter conditions. And of course, leave no trace and be respectful of others. The last but not least, build an inclusive outdoors. Make sure that we are all working to create a welcoming, safe, accessible environment for people of all identities and abilities. So, stepping back to the planning ahead and exploring locally, specifically as available waypoints and things like restrooms, amenities, trailheads, these can all change depending on what's open and closed, not just with COVID, but also with winter conditions or different types of weather conditions. So it's always best to contact your local trail managers and check trail websites if you have any questions at all about any of the conditions or any openings, closures at any specific point in time. And that said, I just wanted to do a quick plug and draw everyone's attention to traillink.com. Traillink, for those who don't know, it's a free trail finder website that provides maps, information, and contact information. This includes websites whenever possible for nearly 40,000 miles of multi-use trails across the United States. It's a great resource for anyone who wishes to find more about specific trails and also just to discover new trails in your local area that you just might not have known existed before. So that's traillink.com. So back into the questions. While some of the preparations you have to think about certainly are going to change depending on how the weather is in different parts of the country, the reasons that so many people have sought out trails right now and in general are the same in the winter and the summer: fresh air, exercise, and fun. And these are things that we hear all the time. Dr. Sallis, what advice do you have for people who maybe haven't been as active outside in the winter before, and why should they try to get outside more frequently this winter?
Well, just to stay well, to build up your resilience in the bad event that you might get infected. So you're better able to resist the infection if your immune system is working better, if your inflammatory system is working better, if you're psychologically in a better mood and a better place. So all of those are just generally helpful. But I'd like to talk about being active and trails during the holidays. We're getting discouraged from having the usual Thanksgiving, because the usual Thanksgiving of bringing family members from all over the country and spending the day in a closed house and eating too much and then sitting around and watching football, none of that is really the ideal right now. So I might suggest take the day, whatever family is around, take the day and go out and find a nearby trail. And in the nice part of the day, have a few family members and wear your mask if you're around each other in a close connection. But then go out and have a special day on a trail. And I think that will be something to remember. The other thing, if trails are not near to you, I want to encourage people to be active every day. And that can be hard in the winter because of the cold and the dark. So I want to pick up on a couple of things that Vasu said and some others. When I visited Wisconsin a few years ago in February, the mantra that they use there is, there's no such thing as bad weather. There's just wrong clothing. And so they ride bikes all year round, all the time, dark and light, and they have the clothing and they have the light. So the headlights that Vasu mentioned. And so my suggestion is put that on your gift list. Give everybody you know a headlight or a low cost but bright and rechargeable flashlight. There's all kinds of new technologies for flashlights, and people can use that every day. When you may not be out on the trail every day, you're probably not, but hopefully you're going to be on your streets or in your local park or in your neighborhood, going out and walking or biking or rolling or doing whatever you enjoy. So that's some of my ideas about actually using this time to make the holidays special in a different way. Try something new and try it maybe a different tradition.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Sallis. And to add on to that wonderful advice, I just wanted to remind everyone again, Rails to Trails did just put out a new blog on that gives a lot of advice similar to what Dr. Sallis and Dr. Gowen and Vasu have been talking about, and that is on the Trail blog at railstotrails.org. So check that out. Some very in-depth advice that can be found, including that graphic that we showed earlier. And and staying on trail use, and really because this is about how we can just have an amazing experience outdoors, even though it's going to get colder and darker. Vasu, as Rails to Trails Conservancy continues to hear stories from people around the country about the way that trails have really impacted their life right now during the pandemic, tell us, how have trails been impacting you during this time? How will you be using trails this winter and adapting your experience to be outdoors and continuing the activities that you love?
Yeah, definitely. So my priority in life is always trying to put community first, but of course that is always exhausting and always needing a little bit of time for myself to recharge and be embodied again. So that's kind of been my entire MO this summer, the past several years, and years to come. So that's definitely how trails have been for me. It's definitely a healing process. It definitely fills my bucket up again. For me, connecting with the land and space around me makes me feel more connected with the community here, and just makes me feel human again. So, and a sense of belonging. So that's where I've been kind of changing and expanding my own personal narrative when it comes to that recreating responsibly or just recreating in general, and whatever it may be. I do a lot of trail running, I do a lot of hiking, biking, skiing. All of that is just a version of me getting outside. And what I say is it's not really about the sport or activity, but it's the feeling that we get from it. So that's kind of the narrative I've been trying to expand on, especially during COVID, is that connection with our natural spaces and the outdoors is very much healing for myself, and I believe for a lot of other people in our world, just because, again, I personally believe, we haven't evolved to be sitting in a box. We've evolved with our ecosystem in line, and making sure that we are engaging and stewarding those ecosystems to be able to connect with them. So that's my way of getting outside and why I've been so engaged in this process.
Thank you, Vasu. And I want to remind everyone, Vasu is one of our Trail Moments ambassadors / influencers. And as I mentioned before, the Trail Moments campaign is really about encouraging Americans, both new and tried and true trail users, to get out there and then tell us, what have trails meant to you during this time, during COVID? Share with us your unique, special trail moments and fill out our survey to tell us your stories. And you can access our survey at trailmoments.org. So we're just encouraging everyone, tell us your personal story. What have trails meant to you? And why are they so impactful for you right now? So thank you. And I think we actually do have time for just a couple questions. We did get some info from our social media audience. Our first question, and I think this is something This is something for Dr. Gowen or Dr. Sallis. There are some questions about how the virus might transmit on the trail or in polar weather. Several folks want to know whether the risk of contracting the virus goes up on the trail as you're passing people or in cooler weather in general. And the guidance most broadly is to get outside. What should they keep in mind outside specifically to also reduce that risk for them and for others?
So it has been disproven that cold weather or hot weather for that matter kills the virus. So weather really doesn't play into it, except that when it's colder, we tend to stay inside and cluster with people, as opposed to when it's warmer, we get outside more often. In terms of the risk of transmitting it as you're passing, let's say two people are biking past each other, that would be very unlikely, because you do need a few minutes, more or less about 15 minutes of constant contact with someone to be able to transmit that. Although we are still learning about the virus, constant motion, if you're passing people on the trail, would be very unlikely to transmit. But very unlikely is not 100%, and that's why we still encourage the mask wearing when you are on a busy trail.
Thank you. Dr. Sallis, anything to add? No. Thank you very much. So we have another question. Vasu, I'm going to, I'd love to go to you first on this. How do you decide where to go and how to manage your risk when places get busy? So that's part of it. We've also received some questions about what to do if the trail does get busy or crowded, or if people are not keeping their distance and possibly not wearing masks. So what advice do you have for people to consider so they can minimize their risk?
So this goes back to that recreate responsibly part, as well as, make sure you have a plan. So if there is a plan A to choose a trail and you see that it's too crowded or people are not abiding by social distance policies or whatever, try to have some sort of plan B trail or plan C or whatever down the line, because a lot of these communities do have multiple different trails. So that's kind of been my go-to. I also tend, unfortunately, because of COVID, carpooling is very limited. So a lot of these trailheads are gonna be overcrowded. What I've realized is, like, even though there are like 40 cars at a trailhead, surprisingly, once you get on trail, a lot of those, it's pretty much 40 people. So a lot of those cars and people have been spread out throughout the trail. So it might look like it's really crowded in the parking lot, but it might not be at the trail, depending on the length of the trail or the quote unquote accessibility of the trail, if it's too steep or gravelly or paved. So things to watch out for in that sense when it comes to a lot of that planning ahead.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think it's reasonable also if you if someone is disrespecting your space and your enjoyment of the trail, to kindly say, can you back away? Or I'm going to go this way if you don't mind passing me on the other side. I think also if you're in a busy parking lot, look around, be aware of how many people are getting out of their cars at the same time, and maybe try and take a turn so that people disperse from the parking lot before you get out of your car.
Thank you. So we have another question here, and this one is related to health. Some folks have asked about different physical experiences during the cold, headaches, difficulty breathing, etc. How can people manage adverse physical responses to the cold while still trying to find ways to safely be active outdoors right now? Dr. Sallis, do you want to take that one first, or Dr. Gowen?
No, I think that's why we have a physician on here. We have some expertise. Let's use it.
I was going to punt that one to Vasu.
I mean, I can totally take that if you'd like.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah. So A lot of so yeah, whenever it gets cold, the air is a little bit thinner too. So making sure we're moving at a pace that's mostly comfortable for us. Um, and then also making sure we're taking in fluids. Water is great, but also electrolytes are better when it comes to any physical activity. So, things like Gatorade or just any sugary products, doesn't matter. This time I will say drink sugar. Most of the time I try to avoid it, but when we're doing anything physical, it's really helpful to make sure our body is feeling like it's supported by whatever we're intaking. Making sure we have enough snacks, especially when it's colder. Our body tends to burn a lot more calories when it's colder. So, making sure we have snacks. I personally love, whenever it's cold, I mostly just love spicy food in general, but I try to have some sort of spicy add-on to any of my foods. So I make this weird, interesting peanut butter mix that has like honey, chocolate chips, cayenne pepper, all this stuff, because spicy food is a vasodilator. So it helps our blood flow a little bit more whenever it's colder. So little tips and tricks that I've picked up on when traveling in the cold weathers.
They definitely don't teach us that in medical school. But now I'm hungry for peanut butter and cayenne pepper.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, we can all buy peanut butter at the store, so I always try to make it a little bit tastier. So
Thank you. And I think we just need to move now into our final question. I think this is a really good one. How cold is too cold to be outside? Is there ever a limit on the weather? I know that we do have one expert who commented on this in the trail blog that we just posted. It can be very much up to the individual. One person on social who poses the question says it gets to be -20 degrees where he lives. Does layering cut it? Does anyone want to take that one?
I mean, it gets -20 here in Montana too. Maybe this person lives in Montana as well. I mean, I can take it. I feel like I've been talking a lot, but yeah, if anyone else has other input on cold weather, I can definitely share. Let's see. So I personally think whether that cold weather is a perspective depending on the layering systems. Especially at -20, you really don't want to have any skin exposed. And you really have to watch out for how much you perspire. So, that sweat is going to get so cold very quickly when it's -20 or, much, much colder. So really, really being aware of how physically active you are becoming during that activity. So if you're breathing heavy or whatnot, so just making sure that you're aware of that, or how far you are from the car or from a warm spot. If you are to get really sweaty, just because that sweat is going to get pretty much freeze on you. So just be aware of that. A lot of layering, as we saw in that chart, I would really recommend something that's fairly skin tight as a first layer, just because that kind of keeps that body heat really close to you. And then try to layer something thicker on top of it, like a mid layer, like a fleece or something, and then a jacket on top of that. So that's super important. And again, the sock thing and the glove thing, and the beanies, if there are ways you can, change those out throughout the day, super important. Toes and appendages are ones to get really cold. You can also use your phone as a camera to see if your nose is going to get frostbitten or have a little bit of frost snip, to notice that it's just going to turn into a really small little white dot if it's too cold. So try to make sure you're aware of your skin contact with the cold. And then I did say, use your phone and whatnot. Try to avoid taking your hands out of your gloves as much as possible, just because you don't want to expose your hands to the cold if it is that cold as -20, which is really brutal. It feels like a burn more than anything. It feels like you're burning your skin. So yeah, those are kind of my tips and tricks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that we have come to the end of our time, but I wanted to really thank everyone again. Vasu, thank you so much. Dr. Sallis, thank you. Dr. Gowen, thank you so much for all of the wonderful advice you guys provided and for your time today. And I just wanted to get one more plug in too. If you're out there and you have a great story of what trails have meant to you during COVID-19 right now, please share with us your trail moments. Go to trailmoments.org and you can access our survey there. So thank you again, everyone. And we really appreciate you joining us, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.